Good evening, thank you for joining us. We are
live.
coming apart.
No, we're live.
Okay, just having a bit of fun there. Tim, thank you for joining us on the show. I would actually say it's a special show because it's pertinent to what's happening in the news today, particularly with regards to that huge earthquake, 7.8 they say on the Richter scale, which happened in eastern
Eastern Russia, Kamchatka. It's a peninsula. If you've ever played the game of Risk, which you probably would never have time to play games, Howard.
I just do live shows. That's a
great family game at Christmas, and Kamchatka is this little one. If you compile some troops there, you can leapfrog over into Alaska, and then start trouble in Canada.
And that's why Donald Trump wants to take Alaska, and he would like Canada, because he could protect America from Russia, because it's so close. People probably aren't aware of that as much as Donald Trump is, you know. But anyway,
wasn't it the largest? Well, for a long time. Well, in the ranking of the highest Richter scale earthquakes, it was up there.
Yes, it's one of the ones that out, I think, 8 Richter scale measurements of being way up there, and in recorded history, that's it's ranking up there, probably in one of the top 8 anyway. You know, so it is a very high measurement, and of course it can and didn't have as bad an effect as it could have done. I mean, people will probably think, oh no, don't worry, we can handle that. You know, but the actual tsunami, if there was going to be a huge one, it would have travelled at a rate of 500 miles per hour, which is the equivalent of an aircraft taking passengers across the seas. So, you know, it is
5 meters
very
high. So in Kamchatka, I think I heard today.
Yeah,
that's high. 5 meters.
Yeah, I know, but it's nothing in comparison to what happened in Japan.
That's right.
What was it?
Fukushima.
Fukushima. I can never say that.
Yeah, that was a big one, and the one in Indonesia. It just depends how long the fault, you know, where the tectonic plate has, as it were, sunk or raised up. And those two, the Fukushima and the Indonesian one, were a long stretch and near the surface, apparently.
Yeah. Well, what I've got tonight is I've got some extracts from Dr. Grady's documentary he did many years ago, which highlights and explains how we have these particular sort of underwater problems, you know, the shifting of the tectonic plates, and how they sank at some stage to quite a depth. But you've got a lot of evidence because of the things which he explains. How are they and why are they 1 mile down, and yet they've got evidence that they were part of the surface of the Earth at an earlier part of history.
Amazing.
And we're not talking long ago, you know, because Grady is very good at explaining that we didn't evolve, we were created, as the scriptures say, and the Earth is not millions of years old, or if indeed that we've evolved over millions of years. So he comes from a very interesting background. He's got a degree, and obviously he's a lifetime member of Mensa.
Yeah. And paleontology, you know, which is all about the study of dinosaurs, and he grew up you know, as an evolutionist, which is always interesting when someone's had all that education, then they see the king doesn't have any clothes.
Yeah, and in today's world that could be very dangerous because you could get locked up.
But by the way, also on the time frame one, I interviewed a while ago on Face to Face Paul Garner, who studied geoscience, and he studied it through university, and he felt really intimidated on the time it takes for granite to cool, because they thought that it came up as a big globule from the core of the Earth or whatever, and needed time to cool. Therefore, ergo, you have these massive time lengths. But more recently, they've discovered it came up in sheets very quickly and cooled very quickly because of the surface area. Right, so a sheet, for instance, has a very large surface area and it can cool very quickly. So that was just one example of how we can get intimidated because someone says, I'm a professor and this is science, and they just are peddling an agenda rather than science.
Well, we're going to be looking at several segments, I'm going to call them, from Dr. Grady's documentary, which was entitled then "The Waters Cleaved."
Right.
I know I think you were out there with
Yeah,
him.
and you know, he described how it means they knifed. In other words, which is a great description of the flood. The waters knifed through from the Earth's surface. In the same sense, by the way, the granite knifed through. So it's a very thin sort of fissure, and it comes through very quickly.
Yeah, well, we're going to be discussing it because, you know, the scripture really does say pretty much what the heading was that we came up with just a few seconds before we went live tonight, was that men will become faint out of fear. And this is taken from Jesus' words, which are recorded in the book of Luke. And if we look at that scripture, chapter 21, do you want to read that for us?
Yeah, sure. There will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, that's quite big, and on the earth distress among the nations, in perplexity at the roaring of the sea and the waves, by the way, that are affected to the celestial bodies, you know. People fainting from fear and the expectation of the things that are coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens will be shaken.
Yeah, before we go to the second plate, not tectonic plate.
Go back to the first plate.
Yeah, the fact is that it says in the scripture here that I've got, men will become faint out of fear. Now we know men are usually, you know, they're very strong, very masculine, take things on their chin, you know. But when that day comes, as Jesus explains very clearly as well in other scriptures, particularly Matthew 24, but he's saying here that the roaring of the sea, which will come, because he'd already mentioned in Matthew 24 that there was going to be earthquakes in one place after another. And that can only happen really to the extent that you've got a huge movement in a set of tectonic plates. And when they come together, let me try and do this here. You've got the plates which are starting to do this, and so one curls on, and then they snap more or less. And there are measurements that are going on, particularly up in Washington on the west coast of America. And because they're doing these measurements every year to see how far these plates are going under each other, and they eventually will tip and snap.
And by the way, you know, nuclear explosions are just an absolute pinprick compared to the forces that are at play. You know, they are ginormous. And this thing about I know we'll talk about it later because we've got plenty of time to talk, but about men's hearts growing faint with fear. Part of that is the awareness worldwide of what's happening and the measurements that you've just mentioned. They are now able to see, wow, that is one of the biggest in recorded history. Exactly.
But it's only the beginning of the movements of these plates, and the ring of fire, as it's called, around the Pacific. We're going to be looking at all of that pictorially, so we don't have to use our imagination too much. But again, Grady explains it very well. But we're going to be showing these different segments, but today we've got a lot of talk time in between, so we are inviting you to take part live at revelationtv.com. And of course, this is a bigger, if you like, project or discussion that we need to have, because there are many, many signs that Jesus spoke about. You know, nation will rise against nation. There'll be wars and rumors of wars in one place after another, and great earthquakes in one place after another. Now, for just some of these, and we've got many things that Jesus pointed to. You know, the fact that our prisons are going to be full. You needn't say the prisons will be full. He said, but there would be such an increase in lawlessness as well. In the last days, and so many different things. And he said, to the extent that this will get so bad, there'll be a time of great trouble, such as never occurred in the world's history before this particular time. And it's only going to happen once. We know it hasn't happened already because of what happens at the end. He has to step in to save the elect, the chosen ones, whoever they are. Okay, hopefully it's you and I, but let's see. And if he doesn't step in, all flesh will be destroyed. So that hasn't happened. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be broadcasting to you tonight.
Can I throw something in that just occurred to me? It's not seen very much as an end times scripture, but it's in Romans 8. And we talked about men's hearts growing faint with fear, but it says that the whole creation is groaning as in the pains of childbirth. So it likens the earth's surface, let's say, the earth as groaning to give birth. And it says waiting, as it were, for the not men to appear, but for the sons of God, for the redemption of those who are going to be the sons
Isn't
of
that
God.
in Romans?
Yes, Romans 8. And I think it's a really powerful analogy, and especially when we look at Grady's videos, because you have as it were, these stretch marks on the Earth's surface, like a pregnant woman.
Well, Jesus said that, didn't he? He said this would be like the pangs of distress that
Correct.
really, as a pregnant woman, is building up to getting to the point of birth. And he says this.
But who would have known that in those days, Howard? Sorry, Albert. That, the Earth is basically liquid. With a little skin around it, which is exactly, who would know that other than the person who created
Very good point.
the earth?
Yeah, good point. Well, we can make a start. As I say, we're inviting you to email in and text in with any questions or any points you would say, oh, well, hang on a sec, but if that's saying that, what does this mean and what does that mean? It's an open mic night in that sense, because we do want to help you to get to understand, if you don't know the scriptures and what Jesus is saying about this time of great trouble, we want you to become aware of it. And of course, like all of us, when we study scripture, we all have questions. I mean, I had so many. I must have been a real pain in the neck to whoever I was talking to about, what about this, what about that? Because it leads you on from one to the next point, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so what we can do, first of all, is have a look at this first segment that I've actually picked, which talks about today's earthquakes and the Pacific ring of tectonic plates, etc. Have a look at this. Okay, so you can see here, this is the ring of fire. Okay, that will actually be the eruption of eventually when one of the tectonic plates starts, like we did today, but it'll trip all the rest of it as well. So we only got a little bit of it today. But can you imagine if that whole area, which is one huge tectonic plate, that would give you a problem. And of course, as you can see there as depicted, it comes from the source. Where does it come from there?
Which source? What do you mean?
Well, it came as you saw there. It was coming from where Jesus.
Yes, well, it came from Caesarea Philippi. This is really interesting because that ring of fire encapsulates the whole Pacific Ocean, which dropped. This is Grady's, hypothesis. That the whole thing dropped like an elevator in a very quick. A very quick action. Now, the interesting thing is, if the whole of the Earth's surface cracked, where did the crack start?
Yeah.
And that's the argument that basically, if you were to crack an egg, there's a point where a very small point, the crack propagates, and when a crack propagates, it's very rapid. So, for instance, God put his finger, or the Lord Jesus put his finger on the Earth's surface, the whole thing split open very rapidly.
Yeah, and again, up there, what was so significant, he was talking to Peter, he was talking to his disciples, said, who do you say I am?
Yeah.
And Peter was the only one who was correct, in saying, you are the Son of the living God.
Exactly. And so if we have a look at that again, just so folks can see the actual detail, if it comes up on the screen. If we hold it, I don't know whether we can freeze it, but going up from the Indian Ocean to where did this crack start? It overlays it, sorry. Yeah. But where did the crack start? It goes narrower and narrower. It goes up past the Gulf of Aden and then up the Red Sea, Rift Valley, then up the Jordan Rift Valley, and it narrows all the way to that one point at Caesarea Philippi, where the Lord asked his disciples, who do men say that I am? But the most amazing thing is, he was standing there when when he said, you can say to this mountain, be moved from here to there.
Right.
Which is exactly what happens in an earthquake. The tectonic plates moved. And it was one of our tour guides, actually, who wasn't even a believer, said, yeah, actually, it moved so many kilometers.
Really?
You know, so the geology on the Jordan side it shows the shift where the mountain was. And who would know that other than, again, the Creator?
Yeah. Well, let's go to the one where Grady's actually explaining about this particular ring of fire. Have a listen.
Let's take a look at the whole Earth so you can see this as a total picture. This is a map of the entire Earth showing what is called the mid-oceanic ridge. And the mid-oceanic ridge starts at Caesarea Philippi, comes right down the Jordan River Valley, turns, comes right down the Red Sea, comes out the Gulf of Aden, turns, comes into the Indian Ocean, splits here, goes east, breaking off Antarctica from Australia, across the Pacific, up and around, finally coming back and meeting itself again. Here it goes south of Africa, right up the middle, and ends near the North Pole. Now, this physical evidence is there for anybody to see it.
What is quite good about that, and so you can picture it a bit better, that like herringbone effect is where these tectonic plates are. And, you know, I suppose seismologists will know exactly what they are and where they are.
Yeah, stretching. I mean, if you, as it were, slit someone open, you just have a cut. But when something stretches, you have the herringbone effect.
Yeah.
By the way, you can't see it, and that's one of the points Grady made in the video, The Water's Cleaved, is that it's under the sea. So it's only more recently that people have discovered, you know, the fact that the whole Earth has massive great cracks in it.
And when we finish tonight, the last part that I want to show you is where Grady goes into great detail about all of this, and so it'll sum it all up and round it up quite good. But again, we're asking you, if you want to ask any questions, please do. Now, the next segment, again, is number 3. We've got no audio again, but let's have a look at it in case it adds something to what we're discussing. Again, coming out of that which goes all the way up to Caesarea Philippi, and again coming round. Now, up the west coast there of America, that ring of fire as it is, and it encompasses also other areas that are joined together with other tectonic plates. Now, can you imagine one will upset the other, you know, so it becomes quite cataclysmic. You know, it's not, instead of an earthquake going off, we got them all the time.
This is the interesting thing from Matthew 24, by the way, because when the tension is released from one tectonic plate, it shifts to another. So it's like, again, the process of the birth pangs or as a contractions. Because once the contractions start, they don't stop. It's a continual process until birth. And again, with these end time events, which by the way, they're all happening now, you know, coincidentally, but they increase in intensity, contractions until a birth, until basically the end of the contractions, if you know what I mean. I mean, I'm speaking hypothetically from my perspective.
Well, the next segment, very short again, but Grady is actually explaining how the Hawaii Islands, which were supposedly going to be well affected today, but they weren't, thank God. But this is, they're in a dangerous place, I've got to say, because also around that whole area, believe it or not, there's thousands and thousands of volcanoes. Have a listen to what Grady says.
On this map, these are the Hawaiian Islands right here. This is the equator of the Earth. North of the equator, on the floor of the North Pacific Ocean here, there are 20,000 volcanoes. All those little points that you see right here, there's 20,000 volcanoes just on the floor of the Northern Pacific right here. And of course, the Hawaiian Islands are just volcanoes that stick out of the water. However, if you go here south of Hawaii, right in this area, you would actually see close up that there's a flat-topped underwater seamount there. It's not pointy, it's not cone-shaped. It's actually flat-topped. It's called a guyot. Guyos are not volcanic cones. They are flat-topped underwater seamounts. Their flat tops are about 5,000 feet below sea level. What is so important about them is that along their top edges we find sandy beaches. Below the sandy beaches, around the edge of the guyos, are dead coral reefs. These kind of corals only grow within 300 feet of the surface of the ocean. Take a look at this diagram done for the American Journal of Science in 1946. Notice that this is a diagram, a cross-section to the second largest guyot in the Pacific. It's called Hess Guyot. Now, here's the Pacific Ocean surface today. Here's a cross-section through this underwater flat-top seamount. You'll notice it's 10 miles across the top. It's not a small piece of land here. But you'll also notice that on the top edge here and here, there are sandy beaches. Around the side here, there are dead coral reefs that only grow within 300 feet of the surface of the ocean. But today they are approximately 5,000 feet below sea level. Well, obviously if I only had one of these, you could make an argument. You could say, well, if you only have one of these, something might have just happened to that one location and we don't understand. And that would be a valid argument, except for this. This is a map drawn for another scientific publication in 1959. Now, here you'll notice we have a map of the Pacific Ocean. And in the key, or legend, it says that black dots are islands, circles are guyos, or submerged islands. You see, the word guyot is just a scientific term for submerged island. And so here are the black dots of the Hawaiian archipelago here. Here are the black dots of the islands of the South Pacific, Micronesia, Polynesia, and so on. But if you look at the map closely, you'll notice there's a circle right here. There is another one right there. But there are many in the middle and to the west, is that right? So let's think. If we have known guyos known to exist, all of them approximately 1 mile underwater today, and we have them in the south, the north, the east, the west, and in the middle, doesn't that tell me that the entire ocean floor sank about 1 mile pretty much everywhere? It really does, doesn't it? So let's think, as a mile of water came out from below here, the entire Pacific Ocean floor here sank like an elevator down 1 mile. We have the double continental shelves here. It is, of course, logical. But we also have the guyos. So we have three basic proofs here. And you saw the stretch marks in the Atlantic. I wonder if you have a good eye. You might also notice that the western continental shelf of New Zealand perfectly fits the eastern continental shelf of Australia here. You can actually see a crack here, and you can actually see stretch marks right there where New Zealand moved rapidly away from Australia.
I don't know about you, but I find it really, really fascinating. And I was in the audience when he did that presentation. I remember at school, now I would be about 14 years old, when our school in North Wales was near Conway Mountain, which was what they called a volcanic plug. And basically, it's formed when the magma forces its way through to the Earth's surface, and then it's flat-topped, effectively. And it's a lovely mountain you can climb up at the back of Conway, you know, the little city there, the walled city. But the point is that these things happen really quickly. You know, they, like a volcano, they come up, and then the surrounding rock is softer, so it all erodes away, and you end up with these volcanic plugs. But so, looking at that, the image of the guyos, it looks exactly like that, but the quantity of them, and the point that they're flat-topped, and they're like all over the Pacific, the Pacific Ocean. And so they all sunk about the same amount. So it's a really important point that he makes. A whole lot dropped.
Yeah. So these plates at some stage, prove that they're moving, and maybe they happened at a particular time, in history. It could have been just after the flood or whatever.
Well, it does seem as though it all happened at the same time, exactly at the same time. We had an email that came through this morning that was from Hebrews about our God is a consuming fire. after it says that there will be a time of great shaking. So it's putting the two together, the volcanoes and the earthquakes together. Like on Mount Sinai, for instance, you know, there was the fire, and that was obviously volcanic activity.
But some of the points there as well, which Grady's mentioning, is this magna as well, and that's always on the move. It's coming up, isn't it? And it seems to be at certain times we've experienced it. I mean, we had the volcanic eruption in Iceland a few years ago, and it stopped all the flights. We couldn't fly from one country to the next, especially in Europe, because of the ash that was in the air, and it was affecting the engines of the aeroplanes. So, you know, this eruption that's going to happen eventually, as Jesus speaks about, will be quite devastating and will interrupt all of the sort of activities that we just take for granted on a daily basis.
Yeah, we're sitting on a cauldron, a boiling cauldron, and we should have a bit more respect.
Yeah. But it's this magna that's underneath, isn't it? And it's, as you were saying, Tim, it seems to be, as Grady said as well, that it's about 1 mile down, you know, and so that's it had to drop at some stage. As I say, I don't think Grady goes into the time. Maybe it is around about the time of the flood when the whole of the earth was.
His great hypothesis, yeah, exactly.
It was the waters cleaved. It was all about the fact. What happened is that it's, you know, people say, oh, it rained for how many days? You know, 40 days and 40 nights. But it wasn't alone the water that came out. It was the waters that came from underneath.
That's the big one. And his main thesis is, and it is quite novel, but it's got credibility, that the so-called continental drift happened very quickly. It wasn't this because for evolution's argument, everything has to happen really, really slowly. But I live on the edge of a cliff, a chalk cliff. It erodes very rapidly. And I asked Grady once, you know, at this rate of erosion, you know, why do we still have the English coastline? Yeah. You know, of chalk. You know, and he said, yeah, at the rate of erosion, you know, the coast of France should be where Japan is now. In other words, it hasn't.
Yeah, it would have been, you know, and the alluvial mud.
Yeah.
Alluvial mud is another point that Grady talks about. The great rivers like the Mississippi, there is only 4,000 years of alluvial mud there.
That's the point.
And if the Earth was a lot older than that, which you know, evolutionists say it is, then there'd be too much mud there to prove that you know there isn't there.
That's the punchline, yeah. Because I was just trying to get my head, you know, in order. But the fact is that it just hasn't been eroding for as long as people say it has. Because we just wouldn't, you know, my house wouldn't be there, you know. Yeah. And basically, most of southern Britain is chalk. None of southern Britain would exist. Yeah. If it was a long time period.
Okay. Well. Any questions are coming in at the moment?
Nothing? Yeah.
If not,
absolutely.
Let's have a look, and then we're going to look at another piece which Grady goes into more detail.
Okay. And we've got different ones. Is Howard's leg healed?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's on its way. It's on its way.
Are we in the tribulation yet? Mr. M asks.
I don't think so. We're in the pangs of distress. I think, as you quite rightly pointed out, Jesus said there in Matthew 24 that it would be just like a woman who's giving birth, but there are many things that still got to happen.
It's a process.
But I think we're so close. That's the thing. You know, you've got all the problems that the world is facing as well, with the increase in crime, with people's love for one another cooling off. People are afraid to talk to you. I don't know whether you know, but you know, when you're living in a big city, people are not as friendly.
Very aggressive.
And you think nobody wants to. They're looking down. They're looking anywhere but looking at you. We used to be able to say good morning, you know, or anything, but yeah, people are afraid.
I once asked someone for directions. You know, I was up in the centre of London. He was so aggressive. I mean, in other words, what? You've got such a cheek to, and I was very polite, but you know, why are you interrupting my day, sort of thing? horrible. This is from Andy. Good evening. The tsunami was God's anger for us all, but his grace stayed his hand from mass destruction, which we deserve. We should take this as a warning, as a lesson, and change our ways before God's anger erupts again. Mr. Sama is also making a grave error over Palestine. God's vengeance will be upon him should he make that error. Well, he's made it, he said it. By the way, the Lord said it's the beginning of the birth pains. So, you know, I don't think we're there yet, you know, with the whole thing going up in smoke. But Les just gives us encouragement. Faith is motivated by your hope, and frustration is motivated by your problems. Faith that is well grounded in biblical hope will get whatever we need and bring it back to us. This is an anonymous, but Howard often and has just mentioned woke. Well, what on earth was Gordon doing visiting Calais? What was it with viewer money? I doubt that very much. These people are lawbreakers. What really angered me was when he said that the migrants were running away from terror, etc. While, thank God, my father and thousands like him fought against such terrors when Liverpool and other places were being bombed nightly, our men didn't run, they fought. If Rev TV can't find a half hour to fill with more edifying stuff, I'll sit in for free for you. By the way, I visited the Songat refugee camp. I think whoever it is who's written anonymously, very bravely anonymously, we've got to know what's going on. When we had Anjem Chowdhury down in Spain, the Spanish Secret Service came and interviewed me and said, why are you inviting this extremist? And I just looked them in the eye and I said, know your enemies. Yeah. And we need to know what is going on in these camps and how the French are basically pushing them out over the channel, I think. And aren't we supposed to be journalists as well?
Exactly, we are. You know, this is part of our job. I'm definitely got my card, my journalist card, and I think it's well earned. And you've been doing the same. You used to write newspaper all about what was happening in the Middle East. But I think it's been a bit unfair on Gordon because Gordon went over there to have a look, and that in those days when he did that,
he had family over there.
Yeah, but it's not only that. It's the fact is they weren't as, if you like, aggressive in those days. There were people that were definitely fleeing for very good reasons. Today, I think the people are jumping on the bandwagon. They just want to get here because of all the freebies. I'm not saying everybody. I shouldn't say that. It would seem that many are, and we've got. Gord's got some stats that he released, and there are many, many men that are on the MI5's list. I think something like 40,000, just from memory, that Gordon showed me today, of men that want to harm us.
And it's growing, it's growing. By the way, I did see some families there, and they were very hospitable. Some Syrians, and they've been escaping absolute terror. A family where the wife was got over to Britain, and he was there with the kids in this tiny little makeshift tent. But I did see a large quantity of marauding young men. And Simone was with me with Helena, and she was really scared.
Yeah. Well, part of those that came from Syria, and one indeed was a family that we came to know very well. They were from, as I say, from Aleppo. Their home had been destroyed totally by what was going on with the enemy over there in Aleppo. And the children and the gentleman, the man, her husband, has got a full-time job. He's got a skill. He's learnt English. The whole family have learnt English, and they're doing really well. And they're Muslims, and they're lovely people, really, really nice. So it was great that they were able to escape and find refuge. But they were genuine people that were looking for help, and I didn't resent it in one bit, you know. But when you're looking at people today, you're not so sure. As I say, there's a lot of people out there who want to harm us, and you know. So anyway, let's have a look at the next. Another email.
Another email from Frankie. The day Jesus said, "It is finished" on the cross, a great earthquake occurred in Matthew 27.
Good point.
Verse 51. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth quaked, and the rocks were split.
Yeah, and even those that were dead in the tombs actually came out of the tombs because of the greatness of the earthquake. And that, the veil, the curtain in the Holy of Holies is about 6 inches deep, thick. So, and that was torn top to bottom.
Amazing.
Yeah, so that was a great earthquake indeed. But the other thing where it talks about that as well is in the book of Daniel, chapter 12, talks about a great time of trouble that will not occur except one time. And so Daniel was very keen, and he said to the Lord, tell him, when is all this going to happen? He said, it's not for you to know. Seal up the book of Daniel, and many will rove about. The righteous will shine more brightly in these days, and the wicked will act more wickedly. I think that is the case. Are we not seeing wicked, evil people like Rudy Kurbana? You know, you know, he is the look on his face.
The increase of wickedness.
Yeah.
That is a really good point. And you know, the wars and rumors of wars, when the Lord was asked about the signs, he didn't dismiss it. He went in detail, and he mentioned pretty well everything that's happening today.
Yeah.
All that happening today.
Yeah. Okay. Any other emails that are going to come in? I'm going to show as well if there's this other piece that we'll go to. Have you got something?
Yeah, no, I've got another one. It's sort of, Eddie often quotes Martin Lloyd-Jones and Billy Graham, who described Karl Barth as the greatest theologian of the 20th century. Barth was opposed to all natural theology, and therefore would have been opposed to the views of Grady McMurtry. Well, he would also be opposed, therefore, on your logic there, Eddie, to what we're talking about here. But the point is that all theology goes back to the God who created the heavens and the earth, the God who revealed himself through the scriptures. Karl Barth, Eddie, would have nothing without the teachings of the Bible. He was a genius in focusing on areas of, you know, Romans and the like, but the Bible is not just Romans.
Okay. Let's have a look at this final segment of from Dr. Grady, because he explains about this alluvial mud which is present at some of the different tributaries or where it comes out into the main sea from the rivers, and it's evidence that it is a young earth, and I think he deals with a lot of other bits and pieces in this segment. So send in your questions if you have them after this.
First of all, how many of you remember something called a continental shelf? What they taught you about in school, the continental shelf? Continental shelf is where the land comes down to sea level, but then the land continues out under the water, but it's shallow. Then you get to the edge of the continent and it goes 2 miles straight down. Now, let's just take a look at a globe that has no water, because you can learn a lot from a globe that has no water. And let's just take a look at Florida, where I live. And west of Florida, here, if you go from Tampa, Clearwater, Naples, Florida, along the west coast of Florida, you can go 100 to 110 miles west into the Gulf of Mexico, and you're still in just 60 to 200 feet of water. But when you get out there about 100 to 120 miles, it just goes straight down. Here we see the continental shelf going around the edge of the Gulf of Mexico, and in the center we have this big empty hole in the ground with a flat sand bottom 2 miles down right in the middle. Now, in the United States, we have a little river you might have heard of. It's called the Mississippi. Well, the Mississippi River has two major nicknames. First of all, because evolutionists say it's millions and millions of years old, well, one of the nicknames for the Mississippi River is Old Man River. But there's another nickname for the Mississippi River too. It's also called the Big Muddy. And there's a really good reason for that. You see, Every hour, on average, throughout the year, the Mississippi River carries 16 to 18,000 tons of mud into the Gulf of Mexico. That's what's called the Big Muddy, right? Now, when the Mississippi River gets to the Gulf of Mexico, the Mississippi River slows down. When it slows down, well, of course, the mud precipitates at the mouth of the Mississippi. And what it does is it makes a big half cone of mud up against the side of the continent. And we can see it. If you'll take a look at the map, here's the mouth of the Mississippi at New Orleans. Here on the map it says Mississippi Fan, but this is the mud at the mouth of the Mississippi. This is the half cone up against the side of the continent. Now, would it be of any interest for anybody here to know that there's only 4,500 years worth of mud at the mouth of the Mississippi River? If evolutionists were telling the truth, and the Mississippi River really were millions of years old, today the entire Gulf of Mexico would be completely filled in. And there's only 4,500 years worth of mud at the mouth of all the great rivers, as I will show you. So I guess they're wrong about the Mississippi being millions of years old. Another thing too, now how many of you remember those big old words, plate tectonics? How many of you are more familiar with the terminologies continental drift? The fact of the matter is it's really very much the same thing. It's an idea taught mostly by evolutionists that at one time the continents all used to fit together in a big supercontinent referred to as Pangaea. And evolutionists will say this big supercontinent called Pangaea broke apart 120 million supposed years ago. That the continents have been drifting slowly and gradually apart for the last 120 million years. And they'll say the continents are moving apart at the rate of 2 inches per year for the last 120 million supposed years. And that's why we have the thousands of miles across the Atlantic today. All of you have seen public school globes. All of you have either noticed for yourself or you've had somebody point out to you, a teacher pointed out to you, the continents actually do in the Atlantic look like they fit together. Is that correct? I mean, if you take a look at the coast of South America, it does sort of kind of look like it would fit into Africa. Agreed? But let me ask you a question. If you wanted to know how well the continents fit together, would you really want to take a look at where sea level is today, or would you want to take a look at the edge of the continent? Looking at this three-dimensional graphic of an ocean, we can clearly see that sea level today is 200 to 300 feet above the actual edge of the continent. Normally, the real edge of the continent lies hidden below the water surface. Using this graphic, we can easily see that the continents fit together in the past. Well, I'm going to ask you to come down with me to Argentina. On the way to Argentina, I want to stop in Brazil for just a second. Now, we were just concentrating on this part of the map right here, the Gulf of Mexico. This is northern Brazil. This is the Amazon River. And right here at the mouth of the Amazon River is the mud from the Amazon River. And there's only 4,500 years worth of mud accumulated at the mouth of the Amazon. And you'll notice that there's a flat sand bottom on either side here, right up against the side of the continent. As a matter of fact, these flat sand bottoms are called abyssal plains. Now let's go down to Argentina and let's just see how well do those continents really fit together. Well, come with me to Argentina. You'll notice that Argentina, the coastline of Argentina is a very ragged, jagged coastline, looks like a sawtooth. But you'll also notice that here, off the coast of Argentina, there's a wide continental shelf here. As a matter of fact, it's twice as wide as Florida. It is 200 miles wide. And you notice it has a nice smooth V shape. And up here in Brazil, you notice it goes in, out, in, out. Now, if I were to move these 4 points over to here, you notice it would fit the in, out, right here in Africa. And this nice smooth V would fit right here. As a matter of fact, these are the Falkland Islands off of Argentina. Here's this underwater peninsula right here, but you notice it perfectly fits right there. And so you really can see that these two continents here used to fit right there. Is that correct? Let's take a look at the little Indian Ocean over here. And let's see if there's some things in the bottom of the Indian Ocean that might be of interest to us. Now, do you notice these little round dots? There's one here, here, there's one there. Do you see those little kind of dots there? Those are actually underwater volcanoes. They're actually pointy and cone shaped. That's why they look like little dots on the map. And here's another feature in the Indian Ocean right here. This is called the 90 East Ridge. It's a huge ridge going basically north and south in the Indian Ocean. But the third thing I want you to take a look at is this right here. This is an underwater mountain range. And let's go out towards the Pacific here. You notice that the underwater mountain range here perfectly fits the shape of how Antarctica was broken off of Australia. On a round globe, it is perfect. You notice this crack continues in across the Pacific here. It comes inland at the Baja in Mexico, comes up the California coast, but there it's called the San Andreas Fault. That fault continues all the way up to Alaska here, then it goes through the Aleutian Islands here, then through Kamchatka, Japan, the Philippines, out across New Guinea to Samoa. At Samoa it turns 90 degrees, goes right straight through New Zealand and meets itself again right here. And of course, if we go back here, we notice it splits here in the Indian Ocean and comes south of Africa, right up the middle of the Atlantic, fitting the general shape of the continents.
I think it's well worth knowing, many believers and non-believers all agree that Pangaea was where all the continents, everything was just one landmass and it all split apart. Would that have been after the flood, Noah's flood?
Well, it does say the Lord separated the land from the water, but that could have still been at the time of Pangaea, because the land was, creation. We have what we have today, and no one really, no scientist, was there. There's a little thing I asked of my geography teacher when I was a tiny little kid, if it's on these pictures is prehistoric, how do you have so much information on something that's prehistory? But Howard, I have to update Grady, because the that Gulf that he was talking about is really the Gulf of America.
Oh, yes, sorry.
It's not the Gulf of America.
Trump took it, didn't he?
But we have an email from Adrian, brilliant, actually. He wrote it just before we played that clip. And he said, in the 10 toes of Daniel, it's interesting, you have iron and clay, and the earth's core is liquid iron, and the earth's crust is clay. I found that quite interesting. I mean, I'm a simple
ruling
guy.
Power that signified, didn't it? We're in that last ruling power, because it started with the head being Babylon, and then it came through Greeks, Medo-Persians, and all the way down to the Roman Empire.
And you have this kind of compound structure,
it gets weaker and weaker.
This is from Alan. So both Alan and Eddie are in tonight. Hello guys, I hope you are both well. Quick comment, has there ever been a period where there were no wars, earthquakes, to which you always mention? Had there been reports of none of these events taking place, then that would be surprising. Your good friend Alan. It's a very good point, Alan. If the Lord had only spoken about earthquakes and wars, but he gave validating signs, and Israel, funnily enough, surprisingly enough, was one of them, when he talked about the revival of Israel and the treading down of the Jews, of Jerusalem, by the Gentiles, which is happening today. Now that hasn't happened all the way through. Well, it has happened all the way through history, but the Lord gave that sort of time limit when he said, until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So that's the key thing that validates all the other signs and the intensity of these wars and earthquakes, because the world war that we had, he said, nation will rise up against nation. He was painting a picture of world war, and that's only happened in the last 100 years.
But what it was a good point that it was raised there. How far back in history can we go where you've got records of, say, earthquakes?
Not long. Is it 100 years or so of the measuring of the Richter scale? But we've got plenty of evidence, like the Krakatoa, going up when Shelley was writing and others were writing their poems. And then, of course, we've got the evidence of the geology that these earthquakes have been going on through the last 2,000 years.
Well, you've got the one in Italy as well.
Oh yeah,
You know,
Vesuvius went up and buried Pompeii.
But again, it was because they were living quite a licentious life.
Exactly.
Were they not? And
Exactly.
you know, put the finger up to God pretty much as well.
Yeah.
But
it was Pliny the Younger who recorded it, because I think Pliny the Elder, so they can date it exactly when the whole thing went up. And Herodotus, I think. No, I've forgotten the name of the year. But anyway, it all was buried under all this dust. They can date that pretty well exactly.
Yeah. One point that I wanted to make here, you know, God had just about 1,500 years after creation, you've got in chapter 6 of Genesis, where the Lord actually says in verse 6, the Lord was sorry that he had made man, and he was grieved in his heart. And the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, from man to animals, to creeping things, and to birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I made them. And but he said that Noah found favor in the Lord's eyes. And so, you know, the earth and the way in which people were at each other's throats, it got to such a fervor that God was going, you know, the killing going on, and there was all sorts of evil. Of course, there was all the Nephilim situation as well, the demonic evil spirits.
And God puts a stop to it. So the Christian scriptures is very much, Eddie, it's one where God intervenes. It's quite clear. He intervened at Babel. He intervened at the time of Noah.
And just to remind you what happened at that flood, that time of the flood, that God not only, as I said earlier, really wasn't just the rain of 40 days and 40 nights that filled the earth, you know, to the mountaintops. It was the waters from the deep erupted and came through in such a volume that the waters rose to way above the highest mountain in order to wipe out men again. You know, so, you know, I think...
there's a precedent
yeah.
for it. Gordon writes, Howard, that just to mention to folks that he's put on the Rev TV website, in the news section, the statistics.
Oh, right.
And he's
Have
put them
you
on
got
today.
them there as well?
And one he just quotes, he says, perhaps most frightening of all is the statistic that there are 43,000 active terrorists on the books of the security service, MI5, and 90% of them give allegiance to Islam.
Yeah. Isn't that
90%.
frightening, you know? And that's what should really concern us. Now, there's a fly on here.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, there's a bit of a joke going on. We're trying to get these two flies that are there, but I didn't want to knock my drink over, so there you go. Yeah.
Yes, so Alan says, what are your thoughts about Christian churches in Gaza being attacked by Jewish settlers? It must cause you alarm, despite them being Palestinian. I don't know what you mean by Jewish settlers. It's the IDF.
No, I tell you what happened, and we've got the evidence as well, because that was another false story. When they were saying that the Palestinians were saying that the church had been attacked by the settlers were, the videos available, were putting out the fire that was, we're going to have that in a minute, we'll have that video, was trying to help to save the church or anything else from the fire spreading. Just shows you how evil and twisted people are to get to blame the Jews, and to get especially those that are in the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
You know, it's just horrific. But the scriptures say this will happen before the Lord returns. It's another sign. Zechariah chapter 12 through 14 talks about it very clearly. So have we got that clip just to show? Have a look at this and see who's telling the lies and who's telling the truth.
Last week, a fire broke out near the Christian village of Taiba in Samaria, and the village cemetery suffered some damage. But here's what the media isn't telling everybody. The fire was started by Arab arsonists who set Jewish fields on fire. Then it was Israeli Jews, the so-called settlers and hilltop youth, who tried to put the fire out. But the fire spread and sadly reached the cemetery. And yet, the world rushed to blame the Jews. No evidence, no investigation, just the usual lazy slander. Quote, it must be the settlers, and it's the settlers doing violence against Arab Christians. Because that's the Arab PR narrative. And too many people, even Christian conservatives, are swallowing it whole. The only confirmed video footage they have shows Jews trying to put out the fire in their fields. That's it. So this is the upside down world that we live in, where facts are ignored and Jews are guilty until proven innocent.
Thank you, Avi Avalo. This is amazing that we've got people out there who are on the spot. So, too many lies for too long. But, Tim, any points you want to raise?
I've got many emails.
Oh.
Anyway, Sylvia says, listening with interest, I have a geography degree where all this was covered. I've always been puzzled by Genesis 10:25, which talks of the earth being divided. Could this be when Pangaea split apart? This is from Dory. You're right, know your enemy. When Douglas Murray heard what was going on in Israel, he went straight over to see what was going on for himself and came back out, backing Israel all the way. This is from Jean. I don't know how much time we've got. Absolutely brilliant what Grady said about the mud from the Mississippi River with the mud that has formed at Mexico. 3,000 to 4,000 years of mud has accumulated there. A straightforward measurement of the amount of mud per year leaving the Mississippi and then calculating the depth of mud at Mexico. Brilliant. Our God is true, direct and straightforward.
Yeah, love it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any more?
Yeah. Hi guys, thanks to you and Grady for a wonderful educational program. That's from Cram. And then Carol says, I live up in West Yorkshire. We are more friendly than Southerners, I believe. People usually smile as you walk down the street and chat to one another on the bus.
I miss, because I came from the north when I joined the music bands down here in the south, and they were really not very friendly. Neither were the people, and walking around the streets in London, you were just very much on your own.
She said she found one gentleman on the bus who saw how lost my husband and I looked, and he did offer directions. So we're not all bad down in the south.
No, that's true. No, I don't know that. But I mean, definitely a big difference. I'm sure where you were living as well on the coastline there, people are a lot more friendly.
They are.
The thing is, you don't blame people for being a bit wary, but the love for one another will cool off, and these are the things that Jesus spoke about. But lift your heads up, because your deliverance is near. God bless you. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Nathan.